Hello, and welcome to CCSSO's webinar, Using State ESSER Funds to Support Innovative Educator Pathways. I'm Jonathan Moore, CCSSO's Chief Strategy Officer. I am pleased to be here with you today to highlight the findings from a new report, The Road to Recovery, how states are using ESSER funds to support teacher recruitment and retention, and for you to hear from state and local education leaders on how systemic investments are making an impact on teacher recruitment and retention. During today's webinar, if you have any questions or comments for the panelist or host, please do so in the chat. We may not be able to respond to all questions or comments shared. However, we will do our best to follow up as appropriate. Today, we are pleased to have the following state and local education leaders with us. I'll introduce each of them to you in a few minutes. Through the COVID Relief Data Project, CCSSO is tracking state ESSER spending to illustrate how state education agencies are leveraging an unprecedented federal investment in K-12 education to address pandemic-related recovery and improvement. Early evidence from state recovery efforts show that these investments are paying off. Today, we're excited to share the impact of these investments on teacher recruitment and retention, and how they are changing the way two states, Indiana and South Carolina, recruit and support teachers. We hope that you will join the conversation by using the social press kit shared in the chat and include the hashtags ESSER Impact and hashtag states leading. Shortages and challenges in recruiting and retaining a pipeline of diverse and effective teachers are not new. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated these challenges and further propelled the issue into the national spotlight. Reports and surveys across the country indicate teacher turnover is particularly high following the pandemic. Many states have sought to leverage ESSER funding to bolster their efforts to recruit and retain their educator workforce. In a new report from CCSSO, analysis shows states have leveraged over $1.4 billion in state ESSER funding to strengthen their educator workforce and support other essential school personnel. Overall, the top category of investments for ESSER state reserves are academic recovery, including tutoring and accelerated learning, out-of-school time programs, high-quality curriculum and instruction, and more. Other state priorities include remote learning, support for school staff, and student and staff well-being. Early in the pandemic, states initially invested in short-term strategies such as emergency staffing and retention bonuses. However, over time, states have leveraged funding for systemic efforts to tackle workforce shortages and retention challenges that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and strengthening the teacher workforce for tomorrow. Of the $1.4 billion in ESSER state set aside to support school personnel, states have invested almost $228 million in educator pipeline initiatives, including over $79.1 million for teacher residency programs and over $69.3 million for grow your own initiatives, such as paraprofessional to teacher programs, apprenticeships, and career and technical education programs. Additionally, states invested $110 million to enhance and expand certification and endorsement pathways, $71 million for general recruitment and retention initiatives, and $55 million in new teacher induction and mentoring programs. These systems-level investments are designed to have an impact long after the ESSER funds have been exhausted. Our new report highlights 5 in-depth approaches to strengthening educator pathways from Indiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Nevada, and South Carolina. I encourage you to learn more about how each of these states are investing in high-impact strategies to fortify their educator workforce by reading the new report and visiting ccsso.org/ESSER funds. Now, I'd like to turn it over to our first state spotlight, moderated by Indiana Secretary of Education, Dr. Katie Jenner. Dr. Jenner began her career as a high school career and technical educator in Kentucky and has experience as a K-12 school administrator, serving as a principal and assistant superintendent. As Indiana State Chief, she is focused on three key pillars: student learning and opportunity, educator talent, quality and value, and system alignment and capacity. Joining Dr. Jenner are Emmanuel Harper and Kimberly Stroop from Heron Riverside High School in Indianapolis, Indiana. Since 2010, Mr. Harper has been a French teacher and served in a variety of school leadership roles with Heron Classical Schools, from Director of Curriculum and Instruction, English Language Learner Coordinator, Director of Summer Academy, and Assistant Head of School. Now, he serves as the head of school at Heron Riverside High School and still teaches French. Ms. Stroop is a special education teacher at Heron Riverside. She has been in education since 2014, serving as a substitute teacher, instructional assistant, and a para-educator. Ms. Stroop is currently enrolled in the Indiana Special Education Assisted Licensure Program through Indiana Wesleyan University. Dr. Jenner, welcome, and please take it away.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate you including Indiana for the spotlight today. You didn't share that that is your home state, so it's always great to see you, and so glad to share a bit about the work that we're doing in Indiana. You mentioned this, Jonathan, in your introduction. One of our three key pillars of focus as an Indiana team is educator talent, quality, and value. We know that in addition to quality curriculum, high quality curriculum, we also have to have the very best educators working with our students day in and day out. And quite frankly, we know that we have quite a bit of work to do. Indiana has approximately 63,000 teachers at over 2,200 schools across our state. And as of last week, there were 2,029 teaching vacancies posted to our statewide data dashboard. And over 20% of those vacancies are in special education. This actually started long before COVID. When we look at our longitudinal data in Indiana, we can look back 10 years and see that we have an increased number of teachers who are retiring or exiting the profession. And then we have a decreasing number of teachers entering our profession. And so it's really creating a squeeze for our state. And we believe wholeheartedly we can either spend our time admiring the problem, or we can spend our time really focusing on the solutions. And so I'd like to talk a bit about some of the solutions that we've deployed in Indiana, and then I'll get really specific on one of them and pulling in head of school, Emmanuel Harper, and our teacher today, our special education teacher, Mrs. Kim Stroop. But a couple things I'd like to highlight. The first thing that we realized in Indiana is part of attacking a solution and really getting after what will move the needle is having good data to rely on. And what we saw is we really did not have great demand data or supply data, who is coming in our pipeline, and would often discover that through anecdotal conversation, hearing from different school leaders and teachers, or when it was, or lag data. So one of the first things that we did, and we used ESSER funding to build this out, is we built out an educator supply and demand marketplace so that we could know exactly the demand, our real-time positions, including educators and also other staff members, because as you know, we need bus drivers, we need instructional coaches, a number of other positions. We released that in March of last year. And then this year we released the supply side. So we know what teachers are in our educator pipeline at our university studying to become a teacher. And then this platform allows the supply side to meet the demand side. And you can actually sort as an applicant different school options, connect straight with the school, and that might not even be on your radar for an open position. So that's something we're definitely thrilled to have. And of course, that data showed us very clearly, which I've already mentioned, that one of our big challenge areas is in the area of special education. That's probably our primary. Pretty quick secondary would include English learners. We definitely need have a significant need there for quality instructors. And then the other area I'm sure that every state sees as well is the area of STEM. So one of the first things that we did in addition to that data dashboard marketplace is we believe the very best ideas and opportunities really start at the local level. So in Indiana, we launched Attract, Prepare, Retain grants, but we led with that by doing a symposium, essentially, where we hosted one in Northern Indiana, one in Central, one in Southern Indiana, where we brought together school corporation teams, including the superintendent, HR, and some team leaders on teacher teams. We brought together at the same table higher education and training providers, as well as people from the DOE and higher ed commission, so that any barrier that they might have as they're thinking about innovative ideas, we could try to cut out immediately by the people and decision makers at the table to get as streamlined as possible. And again, those innovation idea sessions turned into creating ideas that we funded and have piloted, including expanding registered apprenticeships and grow your own programs and some other partnership opportunities. But one specific or a couple specific partnership opportunities that we launched. One is called the iSeal, which is what we're going to talk about today. The iSeal was specifically to attract our special education teachers. So Indiana Special Education Assisted Licensure is what that stands for. And we wanted to look not only at current teachers who may be teaching English or math or another subject who want to add that to their licensure, but we also looked at other individuals who may have a bachelor's degree who would like to enter our profession at a later point than just directly after college. So today we have over 750 participants currently in that process, with 17 on the wait list. It's a very, very popular opportunity. That iSeal, because of its success, led to, we use all the acronyms in education, don't we? ITEL, which is Indiana Teachers of English Learners Licensure. So ITEL is now open, and we'll pay for that education and connect them straight to schools who need. And then what we have not announced yet, but is coming, is iSTEM. So again, we're hitting, which will be modeled right similarly. If you are an active teacher who want to add to your license, if you are a bachelor degree person who wants to become a teacher, we will help you. We will pay for it. We will streamline those courses and get you straight into our schools serving our kids. So on that note, I could go on and on, but the stars of the show really are the people who make it happen. And I want to get straight to Emmanuel and Kim. And Emmanuel, I think we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your school and community, and also why it's so crucial for you to have quality special education teachers?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jenner, for that introduction. So Heron I'm Emmanuel Harper. I'm the head of school at Heron Riverside High School. And Heron Riverside High School is part of Heron Classical Schools. We're a college preparatory classical liberal arts and sciences network in downtown Indianapolis. And our mission is to create world-class citizens. Teachers, of course, are a critical part of that mission. And as we know, Dr. Jenner mentioned this, there's a teacher shortage across the country, and that makes recruitment hard, especially for an even more critical cohort of teachers, our special education teachers. And because of the complexity of needs and supports our special education students need and require, high quality special education teachers are just so essential to ensure that all of the students in our buildings receive high quality and high impact instruction.
Well, Emmanuel, thanks for sharing a little bit about your school and again, why special education teachers are so essential. We'll talk to Kim here shortly, who is a participant in this, but as the head of school who is doing your best, right, to recruit the best of the best to serve students, what have you seen as some of the benefits of the ISEAL program?
Yeah, Dr. Jenner, you were right. We have so many acronyms in education. So ISEAL, just as a reminder, it's the Indiana Special Education Assisted Licensure Program. It solved a real gap in our school. As we mentioned, high quality special education teachers are so sought after. And because of that shortage, there just isn't enough of them. And so ISEAL has allowed our network to leverage professionals who have a deep commitment to student excellence by providing on-the-ground credentialing. And it's this dual coursework theory and classroom practice that makes it such a value add to us in our school. We are particularly blessed to have Kim Stroop going through the process. She's one of our special education teachers, and she's ours, everyone. You can't have her. She's off the market. Don't even try. She's going through this process now and works with our students who have mild intervention exceptionalities. And she's worked so much to strengthen our program. And I'm so thankful to her and to the ISIL program to really solve this critical gap.
And Emmanuel, I mean, our students are our number one, right? That's why we are all doing this day in and day out. When visiting classrooms, visiting Kim's classroom specifically, what direct impact on instruction and learning have you observed?
Yeah, so I think when you go into Kim's classroom, you see that the students are engaged, that they are learning, that you see the practice, the theory that's being taken in her classes being implemented inside of the classes that she is teaching. It really helps to amplify the base instruction that's already there. And Kim does a really great job of being able to relate to students at their level and then take them to the next level of growth. So it's just deeply appreciative of Kim and the work that she's put into this. And I'm just excited to see what August and the years to come look like for her and our students.
And so, Kim, over to you. Now that you've heard your head of school praise you and tell the nation that you are not available to come to their school, why don't you take a moment and tell us about your passion for teaching and what caused you to decide to be a part of the ISEAL program?
Okay. I've been in special education in one form or another since the 2015-16 school year. And watching the lead teachers that I worked with, I've been a special education assistant. Again, not only do we have multiple acronyms for everything, we also have multiple names for really the same job depending on what school district you're in. So I've been a special education assistant, I've been a special education instructional assistant, and I've been a para-educator, just depending on the school that I was with. But watching the teachers, their passion and the aha moments. I will always talk about this. I think I've gotten pinged as being the one who always talks about the aha moments in classrooms, be it the joy that you see the kids when they understand something that you've been discussing or teaching them, and then just the overwhelming warmth that you feel that, oh wow, I was a part of that. I've always considered about taking the next step to become a teacher, but one of the biggest things was holding back was financial. Graduate level, even if it's just for a couple of 2-3 years, that's a hit on the pocketbook when you are an hourly school employee. When I found out about the job at the paraeducator position at Heron Riverside, the department chair actually asked me to go ahead and interview for the teaching position as well. And I expressed my concern about, that's great, and I'd love to be a sped teacher, but ... And that was the first time I'd ever heard about ISEAL. So that opened up like, oh wow, okay, so maybe I can do this. I was hired as a paraeducator for the high school life program at Heron Riverside due to some circumstances. I did step up into the lead teacher role, and went through the process of applying for ISEAL. I was already going to do it even as the paraeducator. When I found out, oh, you can do it as a paraeducator as well as a teacher, or being in the position of a teacher. And I want to say it was easy, so easy to get the alternate license through Department of Education, and then apply to Indiana Wesleyan and be accepted. October, I will be, cross my fingers, I'll be walking across the stage in December of 2024 with my degree. But the support that I've received from Emmanuel and from my department chair has just been overwhelming. The support I get from Indiana Wesleyan, as Emmanuel said, the theory that I'm learning in these classes and then applying them into the classroom has been seamless. They know, I know that they're a college, they're a university, they do educate, they teach educators, but the seamless transition from what I learn in the classroom to applying it into my classroom has been fantastic.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, you shared very humbly a couple of, I think, major takeaways. One barrier you described was the financial barrier and how this opened the door. And then you talked through, the impact on students, and the impact on being able to take your learning and immediately apply it in the classroom, all incredibly valuable. So for the final time that we have as Team Indiana, before we pass it to our friends in South Carolina, I'd just like to hear from both of you about any advice that you would give to us as a state or to other states who might be listening to better attract teachers to our profession. So Emmanuel, I love if we could start with you, and then we'll go to Kim.
Yeah, certainly. So I wanted to start off by acknowledging that if there was a magic wand and it could have been done, it would have already been done. So recognizing that this is a difficult, challenging issue and no one idea is going to solve it. But I think in my seat as the head of school and also a teacher in the classroom, I think so much of what is happening might be a disconnect between what's happening in the schools and what's happening in the State House. So a stronger school to State House synergy, I think, might be great in terms of thinking about, I think, 3 core components of this. So what does compensation and resources look like for schools? How are we ensuring that teachers are being compensated well, and then providing schools with the resources they need, depending on the complexity of the building or the district. And I know some of that work is already happening. I think school autonomy is really important for schools to be able to make changes and adjustments as needed, depending on the population and needs of the families and the stakeholders, so that they can support the students who are in their building and not having a large gap between the needs that are demonstrated and then addressing them. And then I think ultimately it also comes down to school culture. People, just as human beings, we want to be in a place where we are known, we are loved, and we are valued. And a lot of that has to do with the building that you're in. And so I always like to have teachers just come into the building, and they're typically sold then. So the more we can have opportunities for teachers or people who want to become teachers to get into schools that have a great school culture and environment, I think that typically seals the deal for them as they think about that next career move and professional journey.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And we have about 90 seconds, Kim, before we pass it to South Carolina. Can you share your thoughts?
Very quickly, I guess from the classroom perspective, what I would do is would encourage the school leadership, principals, heads of schools, and lead teachers that are already degreed, already in special ed, already have done this, been there, done there, got the t-shirt. Talk to your para educators, talk to your IAs. If you see something, if they speak any kind of interest, encourage them, guide them towards this program, let them know, make sure that it's out there, that people know about this program and what it can do for them.
Thank you, Kim. And I just got in the chat. I can take another couple of minutes if I'd like. So I think I'll look straight at the chat. If you can bear with me, and we'll try to answer some of these questions. Carol asks, are the ISEAL and ITEL programs registered teacher apprenticeship programs? Good question, Carol. They are not specifically designed as registered teacher apprenticeship programs. However, if you do go to our Department of Education website, we have at least one press release highlighting one of our registered teacher apprenticeship programs, and glad to talk to you about that further if helpful. Jack asks, how is ESSER supporting this program? How is success being measured? How are you all planning sustainability when ESSER funds sunset? Spot on. Those questions go through my mind every day, right? So the first one, how is ESSER supporting this program? So in Indiana got about $3 billion in total. And so about 300 million is what we as a Department of Education could use to very strategically deploy certain initiatives. So in the case of this, some of that we're speaking of today, with ISEAL, we budgeted $2 million. For ITEL, we budgeted $2 million. And then we have another initiative called ASSET, which is also focused on special education teachers, and that was designed again by locals, and we've just scaled it statewide. That is also a $2 million allocation. I mentioned the numbers of participants. So we're watching the number of participants. We're watching the number of wait lists and how quickly we can convert those. We're watching how quickly we can successfully deploy these individuals into classrooms. And then there's a longitudinal component as well, right? How long will they stay? Can we retain them? Kim just finished her first year. We hope she stays for ever. I was going to say for 3 years, 5 years, right? But we need to understand how that pipeline is and the permeability really of the pipeline, and if people are staying in roles or transitioning. The final question you asked is, how are you all planning for sustainability when ESSER funds sunset? I work really, really closely with our General Assembly and Governor, of course, and report out on, very honestly, on what's working and what's not working. What have we tried and it's just not hitting the mark? The General Assembly has already selected or chosen to sustain some of the successful initiatives that we have deployed, and then others we are still monitoring. For ISEAL Asset and ITEL, and then soon to be iSTEM, we are still in the monitoring process, so I keep them updated on the numbers, on the wait list, on those transitions, and that may be something that we seek to sustain within our Indiana budget in the future. And I think that was longer than 2 minutes. So surely it's South Carolina's turn. Jonathan, back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jenner, and to Mr. Harper and Ms. Stroop for a great discussion on Indiana's efforts to strengthen its educator workforce. Very enlightening, and kudos to you all for the work you're doing. Next, we'll hear from our second state spotlight, South Carolina, moderated by Lila Toll-Mansinger, Director of Educator Effectiveness and Leadership Development at the South Carolina Department of Education. Ms. Mansinger has served as a leadership development lead, principal, college mentor, and high school English teacher for Summit Public Schools. She now leads South Carolina's efforts to provide a continuum of personalized, competency-driven resources and professional learning to advance educator effectiveness and leadership capacity. Joining Ms. Mansinger is Dr. Roy Jones. Dr. Jones is the Executive Director of Call Me Mr., mentors instructing students toward effective role models. It's a program at Clemson University. Since 2003, Dr. Jones has built Call Me Mr. into a nationally recognized and successful teacher preparation initiative that places more teachers from diverse cultures and backgrounds into the classrooms of Title I elementary schools. Call Me Mr. now operates in 10 states and 33 colleges. Lila, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate our colleagues from Indiana. We talk really fast in the South, right? So we'll get through this quickly and we'll be great. But appreciate the invitation. Always like to shine a positive light on the great work going on in South Carolina. If we head to the next slide, we wanted to just share some data. One of the questions we were asked was, what have you seen in terms of how recruitment and retention has impacted South Carolina in terms of COVID? And so I just wanted to offer some longitudinal data. Much like Indiana, we realized that we don't often put all of our data about workforce issues, particularly education workforce, in one place. And so we forced ourselves to do some of that work. And the patterns we see are mirrored in the national story. We see fewer graduates of initial programs, although, again, I'll say that South Carolina has stayed pretty steady over the past 4 years. We do see an increase in vacancies, particularly beginning of the year vacancies. We have almost tripled the number of people who are not certified, who are serving in positions that we would expect, and actually by law audit whether we have certified teachers in those classrooms. So in our core subjects, that has tripled in the past 3 years. And then we have seen a significant uptick since 2021 in the number of teachers that don't just shift districts, but actually leave the profession. And we know that this hard data is backed up by anecdotal data. So I hear from principals we coach in new principal induction. I hear from districts about the tough scheduling choices they're having to make. We hear about teachers who are fantastic veteran teachers, but they're exhausted from also wearing the hats of covering classes when they can't find substitutes in their schools because they're short-staffed, or they're mentoring multiple teachers and some of these non-certified teachers to really try to write the lesson plans for them and make sure that all students have access to great instruction. And so one of the impacts we see is exhaustion. If we go to the next slide, we also see an equity impact. We tend to, at the state level, look at data at the state level, and things can look pretty rosy when everything is aggregated up to the top. Over the past 4 years, if we look at a school level, even percentage of teachers returning to the school, our state average hasn't fluctuated that much. And even our highest schools, they return almost all of their teachers every year. But the gap between the schools that return the most teachers and the schools that return the least teachers, that's where we need to attend as a state. And that's been one of our lessons learned, that disaggregating data at the school level and not talking about teacher shortages broadly, but actually talking to schools and communities about what their specific needs are will help us be more responsive policy-wise. So when we turn to thinking about ESSER and where we've gone with recruitment and retention, if we go to the next slide, South Carolina has really dug in over the past year to have a recruitment and retention task force made up of all those stakeholders our colleagues from Indiana just talked about, folks from the governor's office, folks from the legislature, folks representing our teacher organizations, some of our higher ed colleagues, and then bringing in the voices of organizations like Call Me Mr., who have been doing work in the recruitment and retention space for years in South Carolina. And really where that task force landed, and hopefully where we've landed as a state, is that we are all involved in making sure the teaching profession is one that students, families, everyone in South Carolina sees as worthy of pursuing, and really a passion that can lead to a fulfilling life for those that can step up to that call. And so when we were thinking about ESSER funds, our superintendent very much encouraged us with recruitment and retention to invest in proven track record initiatives, folks that got both that micro issue, we're seeing declining enrollment in teacher prep, but also the macro issue, that the way we solve that is making sure that students are so excited and engaged in wanting to be educators that they can be sustained and be leaders in that through their life. So briefly on the next slide, one of those investments is in teacher fellows that's run by the Center for Educator Recruitment, Retention, and Advancement out of Winthrop University. They receive both state funding and ESSER funding, and this funding really supports cohorts of students who get fellowship funds to fund their degree in education, and then a service expectation once they get out that they serve a year for each year of support that they received. It's also, just like Call Me Mr., structured in a cohort model. So part of it is having a professional community you're growing and learning with together. The retention rate for that is very high. But the program we want to highlight today, because we have Dr. Jones with us on the next slide, is Call Me Mr. And some of their very impressive impact statistics are here. And I'll just kick us off by saying, I think the two things that stick out, people in education in South Carolina, sometimes it's hard for us to agree on anything. I haven't met a single stakeholder from the governor's office to the districts to the universities that doesn't think Call Me Mr. has been incredibly successful. And these numbers show that, whether it is their retention rate, their expansion, or just the energy you can feel when a Mr. is in your presence and is talking to young people, the success has been clear. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Jones and ask our first question, which is, what do you think has made Call Me Mr. Such a successful Grown Your Own program? And why have you focused on leadership development as an essential component?
Well, thank you, Lila. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you always and your support of our program and the tremendous work you do in the state. Thanks for the question. Why have we been successful? We've been at it now 23 years as we launched since 2000. And the hallmark of our success is really embedded in the very beginning of our creation. And that is when Clemson reached out as the headquarters and the originator of Call Me Mr. to the 3 private HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities in the state. The presidents of those institutions recognized that there was strength in collaboration to address what was found to be an enormous shortage of Black male teachers in the state in the elementary school level, in a state that was 1/3 African-American and yet 1% of the teacher force at the elementary school were made up of Black males, as the chart suggests, of over 20,000 teachers serving in over 600 schools. And you look at the dropout rates, the suspension, expulsion rates, and referrals for discipline that were primarily Black males, especially back then. There was a need to address this shortage, and especially to diversify it within the elementary ranks. So leadership was important to us, and also the belief that there were, in fact, talented, there's a talent pool of Black males that were sitting in our classrooms each and every day that simply needed to be identified, cultivated, cultivating those relationships, providing mentorships, providing access to incentivize, develop, and create a collective vision to address this issue. So changing the stereotypical image of Black males in terms of their commitment to education, and in placing them in third grade classrooms, signifying elementary classrooms, was something that was significant and unique, particularly when you think of what and how Black males are marketed generally, and what appears to be the general interest of Black males career-wise. So having a image of a male in an elementary school classroom struck a chord and was appealing to the state, and this collaboration simply grew. And it really begins with the fundamental belief that no one, and I'm sure even our great friends in Indiana, was preparing to send their teachers to South Carolina to save us. So we had to look at our own population and be able to develop our own educators from ground up. And I think that's what really had struck a chord 23 years ago. It was unique. It was of great interest, and we were able to sustain it from the beginning.
Dr. Jones, I'm going a little bit off script, but do you mind describing how Call Me Mr. works? Because I think as a grow your own model, it's really unique, and that might be useful for some of our guests.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Yeah, it's also recognizing that the things that we felt were needed in terms of development, because again, we're talking about a K-12 system where many of our students that come through our K-12 system many of them are underprepared to go into a traditional college classroom. So you look at what the needs were as we looked at our population, the typical Black male that had the potential for college success, but still had academic and personal deficiencies that needed to be addressed. So how do you do that on a college level, especially? So what we created was a co-curricular framework to deliver the system. So the co-curriculum framework does not earn college credit. It's a framework that demands for the student to be committed to pursuing development without getting academic credit, but it's also incentivized with tuition assistance that goes with it. And within that system, they still have to, regardless, meet all the requirements and demands of the teacher education, traditional teacher education programs. It's not a side door, back door, alternative entry into the profession. They must, in fact, meet every requirement, but with the support network that our co-curricular framework provides in our developmental model that is committed to development. And that's very important, because oftentimes we confuse development with punitive measures. And we really look at we really highlight development from where a student is. Story is important to us. So we understand, we connect the heart and the mind of our students with their story, and why we're so mission driven, and why We have a shared vision for making a difference. That's why we talk about leadership in terms of servant leadership, that it's not all about you. It's about your natural inclination to make a difference, not only in your life, but in the lives of others. So that raises the bar a bit. So it gets beyond praxis core, gets beyond traditional measure. It really becomes really something that's very personal when they think about their lives of their siblings, the lives of their friends. Many of our students come from single family homes. Many of them experience siblings and friends that have been jailed or killed through a number of means, maybe on drugs, both not only their siblings and friends, but even parents. So we deal with those realities. It's really not for the faint of heart. We don't turn away. There's no special school, Lila, as you know, for Call Me Mister. They come from the same high schools all of our students come from. But what is the difference? Just like there's no special school for athletes, they come from the same schools, but the difference is the investment that institutions make in terms of their development that have a certain expectation and certain outcome. We believe that the creative talent within our system, within our pool of students, is valuable in terms of transforming their own educational trajectory, but also helping to transform the trajectory of the students they serve. So, and it's a stakeholder commitment. We don't stand alone. We're not alone in this thing. Just like the collaboration of the institutions, we have a collaboration within our system as well. That's why we've grown from the 4 original colleges and universities involved to 28 in our state, and have resonated nationally, that want to address the same issues. The trouble they're having with Black boys, the shortage they're having in their systems, in their classrooms. And we seem to have developed a model and a formula to be able to be effective along those lines. The incredible thing with ESSER funds, and during the whole period of the ESSER grant funds, is that the inquiries increased for us nationwide while we were shut down. I never would have believed it. The inquiries increased and our expansion continued throughout the pandemic. So what did that say to us? We had to adapt and adjust because we couldn't go face to face. We had to do virtual meetings nationwide. We're now back to face, fortunately, but we still grew because the problems remain constant. So we grew our students that became educators or teachers and principals didn't quit. Our average well above the national average, where we retained at least 85% of our teachers that graduated since 2004 are still serving in public school classrooms in South Carolina. Many have become 12% principals and assistant principals, and even leading teacher education programs. And so we continue to cultivate that talent and to retain the talent. Just like we don't expect folks to run to us and save us, we don't expect to lose our talent to other states as well, because that's what it means. It's to cultivate a culture within our system that is possible for you to have a career that is rewarding and really gives back to the state far beyond what the state has invested monetarily.
Dr. Jones, I appreciate you so much. And I have seen firsthand, you've been kind enough to invite the state to come see some of your work. And whether you're working with the brand new program coordinators at the new universities that are coming on to have partnerships with you and understanding their needs and where they're struggling and where they could use support and how they can partner together, or whether it's building really deep relationships with the districts you've been partnering with, including, I think Summer Institute might be going on now or is coming soon. You have misters that are out teaching in our districts right now. It just shines through. So I'll end with, are there any key lessons you've learned you'd like to share with the other states on the call, whether it's in terms of policy that's needed to continue and sustain this work, or the kind of leadership that's needed that you've demonstrated over the course of your career?
Yeah, excellent. I'll lead off with the question, the remarks you just made, Lila, because for us, we think that what's critical is the whole need to that the stakeholders find ways to interact and be supportive. For example, we have learned not to rely on all traditional ways of recruiting and retaining students. And because too many of our students are overlooked because they're stereotyped into believing, well, I know that, Rashim can't be a teacher because he was such a terror in our school. And we would never refer him for you because we don't think he can be a teacher. Well, we've had to bypass, that kind of a mindset into trying to identify with students and parents directly and creating and helping school districts understand that, look, you're looking elsewhere for what's right in front of you. And if you really look in terms of how to build relationships differently, we can do that. So what we've done, and as you've been so kind to participate, we've began creating these recruitment showcases in which we have partnered with our school districts, our partners, strategic partners and school districts to bring together not just one or two, but all of their males, juniors and seniors, into one space and let us interact with them in terms of understanding and reaching them in terms of where they are. Not starting with, hey, do you want to be a teacher? No, it's who are you? Where are you in your life? What are you thinking about? Because that's where it starts. Because you got to build trust. We have a new mantra that says education, empower, and trust. Educating, empowering, and trusting the students that we work with is very important. And truly believing in those authentic relationships is important, because you know as well as I do, kids are quick to understand whether you're real or not. They will let you know, they will let their peers know that you're not real, or you are real, because you can be believed. And by investing in that kind of relationship and providing a pathway that helps them really visually see that they can get beyond where they are right now. And because where they are right now may not be something that they feel confident in. That's why, and why we start at the early age is because at third and fourth grade, third gate, if you don't read and do math at the early grade levels, you're going to lose over time. And so a lot of that leads into not being able to pass praxis, to be able to get into the teacher education program, because you can't get past the ACT and the SAT or the other mandated exams. And that doesn't have to be. It starts with a belief system, and starts with the confidence that we can make a difference in these young people's lives, and trust that they're going to behave the way they know they can be with the potential they have.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jones. It's always a pleasure. I always learn so much from you. We'll just finish. We have a question in the chat. Are the participants in Call Me Mr. assisted with the financial demands of teacher prep programs? So yes, there is a tuition assistance component. And can they work in schools while completing their preparation? That, I assume, probably happens program to program. There are some preparation programs who allow certain candidates to get an internship credential, but I think that would probably be Mr. by Mr.
Yes, that's a case by case situation. Also, we do have an education loan program that is loan forgiveness. The state has a tremendous program that we take full advantage of, and that also enhances and supports too. We try to minimize debt because of teacher pay over the course of years. You got to imagine 23 years in, it's gone from a tremendous gap in salary. But we also help the students understand there are ways for you to earn money because of what you bring. We have students that are outstanding musicians. They do all kinds of creative things that they also supplement their incomes. So there's we have all of that. Some of our strategic partners are credit unions. So we have strategic partners at banks and corporations and foundations. You mentioned this summer. Right now we have over 80 interns, paid internships right now throughout the summer. as we lead into our Leadership Institute, which is one of the hallmarks of our year. We do a lot during the summer. We don't give up. We're not just academic year. A lot of our development and what we do with Call Me Mr. actually happens during the summer.
Well, I think our time is way up, Dr. Jones. So we're gonna hop off and let them come on. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mansinger and Dr. Jones, for sharing how South Carolina is diversifying its pipeline of pathways to the teacher profession. I certainly have learned quite a bit. Let's bring back Dr. Jenner and Ms. Mansinger to share a lesson or two that they've learned around sustainability and how they plan to scale their impacts. What we know is that ESSER was designed to be a one-time relief program, and much of that funding went to support emergency relief and academic recovery. However, many states have leveraged funding for systemic efforts to tackle challenges exacerbated by the pandemic. As some of these investments demonstrate, continued benefits to students and educators to fully recover from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. States are building upon lessons learned to sustain and scale these high-impact investments. So my question to each of you, and we'll start with Dr. Jenner first. You talked a bit earlier about the thoughts around sustainability and continuing investments that have an impact. Can you say more about that, specifically how you're approaching sustainability through the lens of funding, policy, or even current or new partnerships?
Sure, absolutely. And before I answer your question, Jonathan, I have to tell the South Carolina team, I've heard about Call Me Mr. for many years from your past state superintendent, Molly Spearman, who was a huge champion for that. So it was cool to hear from you today. Thank you for sharing. So Jonathan, to your question, and as I mentioned earlier on the call, the webinar today, this was a massive amount of money that we as states received. And Indiana was a state that fortunately we were able to open our schools more quickly than other states. And so we had the opportunity to leverage our funding in different ways. Part of, in my opinion, when we spend money to drive student learning and drive the outcomes that we need to see in education, we always have to track those measurables and be honest when it doesn't work, and be honest when it does work. So as I shared earlier, that's part of the expectation of the Indiana constituents, and we work closely with our General Assembly and Governor to highlight what works, what we should sustain as a state, and again, what we should not. We've already started that process just in this last budget session, where we have sustained some of our initiatives. One specific example is Crossing the Finish Line, which helps students to earn credentials of value, educational attainment, which Indiana needs a lot of work on. Our General Assembly sustained that. That's one of several examples that I could share. We've also done the opposite, where we've cut off some things that did not work. We had a community partnership opportunity with schools, and we have noticed that some community partnerships are driving student outcomes more so than others. So we're leaning in to those that worked and shifting away from models that didn't work. So that's one such example. Those are several examples actually of return on investment that will drive funding and policy in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Jenner. That's very insightful. And to Lila, I would like to pose the same question. How are you all in South Carolina approaching sustainability through the lens of funding, policy, or even current or new partnerships?
I think the story on funding is very similar to Dr. Jenner. We're looking at return on investment. We're looking at trying to find sustainable state funds for things that are working really well, and maybe sunsetting some things that aren't working well because they were emergency relief fund. I'd only add, we've learned so much through ESSER about monitoring and what metrics matter, what metrics we're gathering, what metrics we need to gather. And some of that is partnership with institutions like Clemson, who've taught us, we get them when they're seniors in high school. So we're gonna need a couple years before you're gonna see some of your traditional metrics. You might want to look at matriculation instead of if folks are circulating, because these funds won't hit for 6 years. And we've learned a lot there. Policy-wise, the ESSER funding has made us consider policy changes like, do we need to reconsider Praxis Core? Do we need to have an inventory of all our preparation programs and how successful they've been and what their exact enrollment is? What kind of funding for Grow Your Own do we need to increase, and what do those partnerships look like? How does that work with apprentices and federal funding? We've needed to think about a statewide PR campaign. How do we get people excited about being bus drivers and teachers, cafeteria workers, all of the roles that sustain our schools?
Thank you so much for that. And at 4 o'clock, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you to all of our speakers. A recording of the webinar will be available to all registered attendees shortly after the webinar. A link to the new report on ESSER investments in teacher recruitment and retention has been provided in the chat. We also encourage you to visit our website to read other publications on high-impact tutoring, digital learning, and student and staff well-being. And stay tuned for an upcoming report on out-of-school time. If you have any questions, please contact Austin Estes, our Program Director of the COVID Relief Data Project. Please continue the conversation on social media using the social press kit provided in the chat and include the hashtags ESSER Impact and States Leading. Thank you again for joining us today.